Karsten Wall has always had an interest in nature series and documentaries. For his first solo project, he took a closer look at the animals around him, following the lives of urban geese and exploring their interactions with city environments and water systems. His film, Modern Goose, aims to expand awareness and respect for these often overlooked animals. It will be featured at this year's Gimli International Film Festival. Let's get into it.
I'm a new filmmaker, and my first project was kind of a nature series, and I focus mostly on nature filmmaking. And then I wanted to do something on my own that was a little bit out there, but I also wanted to do something that I didn't need such a big budget for, because I knew that was going to be hard as a new filmmaker to get a budget for a big nature film. So I started thinking about animals that live close to me, animals in my backyard. And it started with thinking about something around pigeons. And then I did notice while I was scouting out locations that geese were kind of competing with the pigeons for some food by the train yard. And then I started thinking more about geese more and more. And the story kind of started to fall into place after I did some research. Just like a lot of Canadians, I didn't really think about them that much. They were always there. I appreciate them, but I never really gave them a deep look, and they're kind of in the background a lot of the time. So I decided to focus on them, and I'm glad I did, because they ended up being pretty complex, and now I really love them.
Yeah. I think for like a lot of people, like I'm definitely in the minority of this, where I love seeing them every year in the area around the legislative building. When there weren't as many on the river, I was really like kind of heartbroken. I was like, oh no, we're all the geese. But I know the conversation sometimes is people feel annoyed by them. And that, like you're mentioning, it's just like a background thing. You don't really think about it. They're there. So let's go through the approach of this film. Like there were several different locations that you filmed at. What was the goal when approaching it? And how did you decide to film each scene and location?
When I first started filming, I didn't really have much of a plan, and I would go out to the South Winnipeg, and where most of the geese are, and spend a few days filming them. And then I realized shortly that, filming them, not much happens. They just eat and poop and sometimes fight each other. I was like, okay, I got to approach this film differently. I can't show that for 20 minutes. So I started to think about how they interact with different parts of the city, because there are geese in the parks, there are geese in the suburbs, and there are geese downtown. And then I started thinking about, well, what all these things have in common is the geese always got to be by water. So I started thinking about how water interacts with the city, and what, like how it flows from the outskirts to the downtown, and how it gets kind of polluted along the way. And I was thinking about the geese in the same way, how they travel through the town, and when at the end of the season they're not the same, kind of just like how the water flows through, it's not the same. And then I started to connect those ideas, and then focus on several areas and different groups of geese to see where those storylines go. And I kind of had the scenes planned out already, like the locations as the scenes planned out. So I knew that the beginning was going to be the suburbs, and I knew the middle was going to be in the St. Vital Park, and then I knew close to the end was going to be downtown. I also had the different seasons. So the seasons actually lined up with the geese, because the geese in the suburbs are only there in the spring. Well, most of them, like a lot of them will leave early summer, and then the ones in St. Vital Park are there all summer long. So my filming schedule kind of followed them too. So, and then when migration season came, I was all over the place in the fall. I went everywhere, wetlands and downtown. And
when you were talking about following the flow of water, I really noticed it. As we're going through the scenes, there's the chaos of the birds dealing with the city life and the roads, particularly the scene where they're fighting and one inevitably gets hit by a car, which I think is just a real shock moment for viewers to be like, oh, wow, this is the reality of these creatures that kind of live on that precipice of life and death at any time. And then, yeah, you get to the park scene. It's a little bit more tranquil, a little bit cleaner, but then you're following that water. You start seeing the garbage and the pollution and kind of going through the city. And I think it's important to highlight those that you don't necessarily think about how our day-to-day life as humans affects life around us, particularly on the smaller scale with water.
The water story was actually supposed to be a lot bigger. I kind of got lost in the weeds with that. Like I started getting really into that message I was trying to tell, and it just the time frame didn't allow for it. And I think the film was already pretty long, so I was trying to do more with that. Hopefully, in the future, I can do a film that's just about water and wetlands.
I think that's part of the learning experience, right? When approaching a film, that you never really know what it's going to be after the cutting room floor. Like you may have an idea, but it's like, okay, well, I want to follow this story. That's not going to fit. Like I'm trying to fit it within that short film time frame. It's a great learning experience to be like, okay, how do I approach this next time? How can I ensure, just like when you were mentioning, planning out things. I know for me, whenever I've worked on projects in the past, it's always like, oh, let's just do this, no plan, and planning is essential when you're filming or making anything.
Yeah, definitely with documentaries, especially nature documentaries, like you always leave room for something wild that happens while you're filming to take the storyline in a different direction. And you're kind of taking notes every day about things that have happened that maybe might influence your storylines, but you kind of need to have some pre-planning and a story structure to begin with. Otherwise, you'll have a lot of aimless footage. Like, when I started, I just shot everything, and most of it didn't make it into the film.
Starting in the spring and kind of going through migration, that's a long time frame. How long did this film actually take from like the filming, planning, and getting it onto that editing bay and making your final product?
Yeah, I think it was roughly I didn't film in the winter, but it was roughly 2 years of filming. Like the NFB worked in a way that they were like they wanted me to develop the storyline. Like they didn't give me the green light right away, but it was COVID lockdown and I had nothing to do, so I was like, I'll just shoot in anticipation for getting potential green light. And if I didn't get the green light, I was like, I'll just make the movie anyways. So I shot 2020 and then 2021. When they finally gave me the green light, I shot in 2021, and then I edited 2022. And while editing, I was doing pickup shots. So it wasn't full shooting schedule, but and I didn't work on it straight through. I had my day job in between that I was trying to keep up at the same time. Yeah. Like I did for editing did take a long time, and what's the word? I kind of like,
Because I know for myself, whenever editing something, whether that's podcasts or videos, I always find that's the most difficult part for me. Going on location, shooting it, getting it, acting, like those things are all fun, and I really get excited for those. The second you're sitting down and you're trying to make that finished product, I'm like, oh boy, where do I even go? And then you're editing for like 5-6 hours straight, and you're like, my brain is just gone.
For sure. Shooting's the fun part. Editing and the post-production, that's the tough part. And there's a bad habit, especially when you film and edit at the same time. You think shots are a lot more important than they are because of the scenario you got them in. Like I'll have a shot that really while I was shooting it was like, wow, that's an amazing shot. That like just how much work I went to get that shot. And then I'll put it in the edit suite, and it won't really have a home, but I'll try to make it have a home. And then that's kind of a pitfall. You kind of want to hire an editor you can trust to get away from those, because they don't care how you got the shot. They'll be like, well, does it work in the story? So that was a hard process to get rid of lots of things that personally meant a lot to me, but the time frame didn't allow. And my day job is as an editor, so now I understand when I work with directors how crazy they get over certain things, and it's like I respect that a lot more now, because now I know it's a very tough process to hand your footage over to somebody.
You need that trust to be like, oh, and I guess it's also kind of a collaborative thing. It's like, as the director, cinematographer, you're grabbing this footage, you have an important aspect of it, like it feels important to you. And then you, the editor is trying to get that finished product out to try and create this story that you've talked about. But it's finding that balance of like, sometimes things don't work. Like maybe the editor will be like, oh, what if we frame it this way, sort of thing. So it's about that collaborative approach.
You really want to find a good editor that you can trust and doesn't have the emotional baggage with your footage. But then you can interject it as a director and be like, oh, actually, I got this shot for this reason. So yeah, it's collaboratively, that would be the ideal. Editing your own footage is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
So in this film, water was something that you wish you focused on a little bit more, but you have ideas for future projects. What do you hope people take away from this film when watching these geese go through their life?
In general, I want people to just notice them more and respect them more. They're kind of disposable in the city a little bit. And I don't know, I see people treat them pretty poorly in the city also. So it's in general, just people just give them a break. They got a tough life, and stay out of their way and stop messing with them. Broader, like I left the film pretty, without narration, pretty vague. Like it's kind of open to interpretation, but one of the general feelings I want people to get is just like an idea that like the city isn't real life. The movie's for city dwellers, and to remember to get outside and remember to appreciate nature, because the way that we live in the city is very unnatural. It's not good for us mentally, physically. It's not good for animals. And it's just good to remind ourselves that like for nature, our cities, our big concrete structures are kind of just obstacles. It has to find a way through it. Sometimes nature benefits from us. Sometimes it doesn't. At the end of the day, it's kind of just an oddity in nature. Like it doesn't make sense. If it makes sense for us, but it's a bit of an unnatural environment. So thinking about that and maybe connecting it to a wider view of with water and stuff, how it affects water. And very in the back, and a message I had way in the back that didn't come out as I wanted it to, but it's in there in certain shots if you pay attention, is just how like how amazing wetlands are, and how we have all these systems to control water in our cities and to purify water and all these things, but wetlands do it all and way better than we do. And so we just if we just let wetlands be wetlands and saw them as land that had that value, like that's their value, like they clean the water for us.
Land and stuff beyond just a monetary value, right?
Wetlands are the first thing to be deemed like of no value, and like especially in the suburbs, they will bulldoze. I mean, it's changing a bit now, but mostly they will bulldoze wetlands to create fake water management structures and ponds and stuff, just because if you get rid of all those wetlands, you're going to get flooded. They're there for a reason, right?
Flooded, fewer animals, less biodiversity. Like going to Okamic Marsh, that place is so beautiful, but learning about how much it has shrunk over the decades due to urbanization, farmland. And I think every time when we're looking at like nature documentaries, it's about finding, not to say like we got to completely destroy everything, level down the cities. It's about finding that balance between things, like finding a place. Our parks could probably become even better wildlife sanctuaries, like a place of refuge for wildlife, developing more places around the city that coexist within our buildings and other structures.
Yeah, I think I've seen hopeful signs in newer suburbs that they actually kind of try to make a wetland, and I've seen it a few times where instead of making those fake ugly ponds with the fountain, they will just kind of try to keep a natural wetland there and let it rise and fall with the rain and stuff. So
yeah, I will always be an advocate of, I believe naturalistic development is much more beautiful than just pure concrete structures or replicated. Like you can't beat the beauty of a natural wetland. Same thing with like yards. I hate just mowed lawns. It just drives me mad. Whereas you see someone who develops a more naturalistic lawn with like variety of different plants and like flora and stuff. Like it's just so beautiful. And I think, yeah, we need to engage in that a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree.
Why is it important to showcase explorative films like yours, Modern Goose, at a festival like GIFF?
I mean, it's important to support local filmmaking and Canadian filmmaking because it's not doing so well. It's kind of the cuts keep coming to all our arts organizations, and any kind of exposure, any kind of help that filmmakers can get in Manitoba is very welcome. Like along with our wetland environments, our culture is endangered too. So I really admire festivals, and the programming at the Gimli Film Festival is top notch this year. I'm very excited to see the films they have, and I'm honored to be part of that, and also I'm honored to be part of the National Film Board's catalog, which is still chugging along and still trying to carve out a place for culture in this country.
Yeah, I was talking with the executive director, Taya, and we're talking about the importance of arts and cultures here in Manitoba, and like GIFF is like one of the premier festivals here, and it's just an example of like, if people come here and like we showcase some of the amazing talents from like locally and across the country, as well as some other international films, like it showcases to our policymakers that like people care about the arts, they care about local films, and that we need to keep them thriving and surviving. Because if Modern Goose doesn't exist, you don't have that opportunity to delve into the eyes of a local trying to make a difference like yourself. Like, I think it just showcases not only just the diversity of things, but the opinions and how people are really trying to make a difference through their stories.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing that happened recently with the NFB was for Canada Day, they had a selection of films from each province and territory that they think makes up somewhat the identity of those provinces. And I was honored to be in that. One of my films honored to be in that, and I decided to watch some other Manitoba National Film Board films. And man, there's some really good ones. And some of them are old, some of them from the 80s, some of them are from the 70s. There's one about Churchill from the 70s. There's one about the North End from the 80s. And I was just thinking, like, without that funding, without helping these artists, there's no historical record of the culture of that time. There's no, like, it's more than just, especially documentaries, like there are art, but there are also historical record. Like you're capturing a moment, a feeling of what it was like to be there back then. Like without that film, I would never know what it was like, because I didn't grow up in Winnipeg, and I would never know what the culture was like in that area. Like I would know by reading a history book or a Wikipedia article and know what Winnipeg's North End was like in the 80s, but you'll never get the actual like feeling of it. That's kind of the point of documentaries too, is to capture the feeling of the time and the place. And the film's called Ted Berryluck's Grocery. And
I'm gonna have to look it up for myself.
And the Churchill one is called Some Natives of Churchill. Some of the attitudes are a little old fashioned, but in the end, they have a great message for both films. And just like, I guess that's what I see the huge importance of funding the arts is, not only just to have a culture and to have a country with a culture, but also to like remember these times in the way that they were, like that aren't just, remember them artistically, kind of, for documentary filmmaking anyways, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that completely. If you read something like a textbook or something, it feels so just bland. It's just like, oh, here are some things. But when you actually get to see through the lens of a camera, through someone exploring, trying to capture something for an audience, it feels completely different.
And if we cut all film funding, I mean, it's the same with dramatic films. If you cut all this film funding, then we're going to have a hole in our memory as a population. It's going to be more than just a historical hole. It'll be a spiritual hole. Like it's kind of a human need. And
another interesting aspect of the Gimli International Film Festival is the interactive aspect of it as well. You get to watch films, but then you can also discuss films. So I think you're part of two different things. The shorts program too, class order species with a Q&A. So you're part of that Q&A. Then there's the industry session, filmmaker in a conversation. Tell me about that. Why do you think it's important to have these more interactive elements in terms of exploring a film beyond just the presentation and the consumption of it?
I'm in no way a master or expert at filmmaking, but I am a quite experienced editor. And so I'm always excited to talk to people about post-production and especially documentary post-production and editing and what techniques I have learned. And a lot of my techniques were not learned in film school. They were taught to me by veteran filmmakers and it's just kind of like stuff that you can't really learn in school. And I've learned from other editors too. And it's just like certain tricks of the trade and how to manage different projects. And I really enjoy sharing that knowledge with people. I'm a little out of my element when it comes to being when it comes to talking about actual nature filmmaking, because I'm pretty new to this. This is my second project and my first real project with a budget. I'm in no way a expert in filming nature documentaries, because this is only my second project and my first project with a real budget. And the cameras I use are not what the pros use. Like the camera for Modern Goose is on the lower end of what professional wildlife filmmakers use. So
I mean, to be fair, some of those shots, especially the one with the Northern Lights, absolutely breathtaking.
Oh, thanks. But I really enjoy trying to help other filmmakers understand how editing works in some of these bigger documentary projects.
I can't wait till more people get to experience Modern Goose like I did. Where can people go to find out more about yourself and your work?
Well, the National Film Board of Canada's website is where my film has its home, and you can search there. You can just type in Modern Goose, or you can look at their Across Canada showcase, and you can see my film with a bunch of other great films that they've selected to represent provinces and territories across Canada. And I highly recommend people go there and check out at least 2 films from each province and territory.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.